Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our meeting Monday, February 28th, 2022. This meeting is open to the public and is available through an online platform. Please subscribe to the Township of Wilmot YouTube channel to watch the live stream or view after the meeting. Delegations must register with the Information Legislative Services Department. The only matters being discussed at this meeting will be those on the agenda. We start off with a motion to go into closed. Have the clerk read the recommendation, please.
That a closed meeting of council be held on Monday, February 28th, 2022 at 5 p.m. in accordance with section 239, bracket 2, bracket F and bracket K of the Municipal Act as amended for the purposes of F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and K, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality.
Thank you. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I don't have an agenda for them.
Okay, so we will now be moving into the closed session. Everybody will be signing off of this meeting and going to the closed meeting link. Thank you very much.
Okay, welcome. Ask the clerk to read the motion to reconvene.
That council reconvenes in open session at 7:00 p.m.
Thank you. That is moved by Councillor Gerber, Councillor Fisher. All in favor? Thank you. And Councillor Fanning sends her regrets for this evening. Before we begin tonight's meeting, let us take a moment of silence to acknowledge the difficult situations unfolding in the Ukraine. As we watch these devastating events unfold, the Township of Wilmot stands together with the people of Ukraine and Ukrainians across the world. We stand in solidarity against Vladimir Putin's decision to invade the Ukraine. As a sign of our solidarity with the people of Ukraine, the Ukrainian flag was raised earlier today at the Wilmot Administration Complex. The loss and terror that Ukrainians are feeling right now extends into our community, where in Wilmot Township and across Waterloo region. To those who have loved ones in the Ukraine or Eastern Europe, our thoughts are with you during this difficult time. Thank you. I will ask Councillor Hallman to read the territorial acknowledgement.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the settlers arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and to Mother Earth. We should only take what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant, the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none. Adoption of the agenda. Madam Clerk.
That the agenda as presented for Monday, February 28th, 2022 be adopted.
Have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Hallman, seconded by Councillor Fisher. Any comments or questions? Omissions or corrections? Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I mentioned this to Ms. Chambers, but did want it to go on public. With regards to comments on the agenda for report 2022, 39, the Scout Wetlands, one of the comments at the very end said that a policy, naming policy can be done. I believe on my request with recommendations was that a policy for naming will be done. To just highlight that the Waterloo Region School Board has come up with a policy that they will no longer be naming schools after peoples. So I would like to see a similar policy come forward through the township and just ask for that change in the minutes to be reflected of that. Thank you.
So noted. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. That is noted. Thank you, Councillor Gordick.
So all in favor as amended. That is carried. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. Minutes of previous meetings. Madam Clerk.
That the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as presented. Regular council meeting Monday, February 7th, 2022, and ad hoc budget advisory committee meeting Monday, February 14th, 2022.
That is moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Holman, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. There are no public meetings. We do have a presentation. And that would be Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong and members of council. On behalf of my team in corporate services and peers on the corporate leadership team, I'm pleased to present an overview of the 2022 municipal budget being brought forward tonight for formal approval. Next slide, please. The 2022 budget process commenced in the fall of 2021 with our first meeting held in mid-December. Over the time frame shown on this slide, we've moved from the target levy guideline in December to a complete and balanced budget package for council's approval this evening. Next slide, please. Beginning in early December, the budget committee provided a guideline for an inflationary increase to our operating budget that's equal to the core consumer price index median measurement of 2.90%. Assessment growth throughout 2021 continued to be relatively low, contributing to a 1.34% increase in levy funding. The committee did approve the continuation of our asset management efforts with a 2.0% infrastructure investment to help in building the necessary internal capacity to help close our existing infrastructure funding gap. Staff will continue to monitor the infrastructure funding requirements moving forward, but are pleased to see the committee's continued support of this staged implementation of an important funding mechanism. Finally, a number of service level increases are required to meet the needs of a growing community, and these additional resources required a special levy adjustment of 2.83%, which was achieved through the operating budget. The combination of each of these factors resulted in an additional levy funding of just over $830,000, bringing our total 2022 levy to $9.9 million. Next slide, please. So this graphic quickly goes over historical inflationary levy adjustments, which tend to be around the 2% mark, as you can see, and as you'll have noted with most commodities. The 2022 inflationary adjustment at 2.9% is higher than historical amounts. This added additional $267,000 in funding, or close to $29 or just over $29 to the average residential property owner. Next slide, please. Assessment growth, as shown on this slide, was slightly lower. Was slightly lower once again this year. Staff are hopeful to see additional growth as new developments come on stream in 2022. The 1.34% assessment growth generates an additional $121,000 towards the general levy. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the levy increases over the past 10 years. The 2022 inflationary adjustment, as you can see, was a full percentage point higher than 2021. And with the special levy of 2.83% to meet service level expectations for 2022, the overall levy increase was higher this year. Next slide, please. Just a brief overview of our capital program. So the 2022 capital program is valued at just over $14 million, with a number of additional projects that have been carried forward from 2021. It will be an extremely busy year for infrastructure projects in Wilmot Township. Some of the key projects have been listed on this slide, but the full listing is included within the final budget package to be posted following tonight's meeting. The Prime Minister's Path stakeholder consultation phase 2 is set to occur within 2022, while third-party consultants will assist in developing a comprehensive communication strategy and third ice pad design. Growth will be supported through the critical construction of the Baden Trunk sanitary sewer and EA process. Health and safety remains our number one priority, and the 2022 program includes specific investments towards corporate security, fire services, equipment replacements, and safety-related projects at the WRC and admin complex. The multi-year reconstruction of Snyder's Road will enter phase 2 in 2022 and will continue to be led by the region of Waterloo. Finally, a number of projects will continue our township's efforts towards improving recreation amenities throughout all communities. Council can prepare to see tender and RFP awards coming forward later in the first quarter in preparation for another busy construction season. Next slide, please. This graphic depicts the proportional funding that supports the capital program. A large component of the funding, as can be seen in the green shaded area, continues to come from senior government programs. This underscores the importance of open dialogue with our counterparts at the province and federal levels of government to ensure stable, reliable, and predictable funding through both Canada's Community Building Fund, formerly Federal Gas Tax, and Ontario's Community Infrastructure Fund. The blue shaded area indicates current year tax levy dollars contribute to capital. This represents just over $1.4 million of the $14 million program. The majority of remaining funding is derived from development charges and infrastructure reserve funds. The new gray shaded area on the top left is representative of the debt financing requirement for the 2022 program. This will be discussed further and presented through the debt management and reserve fund strategy coming later this year. Next slide, please. Following endorsement of our 2022 program, the committee reviewed and endorsed the updated 10-year capital forecast. This living document follows guidance from a number of studies and plans and currently sits at approximately $121 million over the 10-year timeframe. As the asset management program at the township matures, this forecast will continue to be a foundation for long-term infrastructure planning with stronger support from asset management's perspective for evidence-based decision-making. Other key inputs to our long-term financial plan have been noted on this slide. The Parks, Facilities, and Recreation Services Master Plan and Trails Master Plan are two key drivers in the Parks and Facilities capital program, and both are set to be updated, complete with public consultations in 2023. Next slide, please. This slide just is a graphical representation of the funding sources that support the capital program over the 10-year frame. The key focus from a financial perspective in the capital forecast is the maroon shaded area at the bottom. This represents the levy funded portion of capital spending where staff try to target an inflationary increase each year over the 10-year horizon. So the 2022 levy funding towards capital is $1.4 million and increases gradually over the 10 years to reach $2 million in 2031. To ensure this is sustainable, staff utilize development charges, grant programs, infrastructure reserve funds, and debt financing to keep the program sustainable. Staff will be, as mentioned earlier, staff will be developing a debt management and reserve fund strategy in 2022 to ensure the long-term operational needs of the community are not held back in any way by future debt servicing costs. Next slide, please. So this is regarding the operating budget, which was approved by committee at our last meeting on February the 14th. It followed the guidelines set by committee regarding the inflationary increase, special levy, and includes a net transfer to levy funded infrastructure reserve funds of just over $520,000. It's clear that staff were challenged in meeting the goal of this budget process amidst continued COVID-19 operating pressures and another 15% clawback of Ontario Municipal Partnership funding. However, the carry forward of unutilized safe restart funding and continued cost containment strategies ensured that we could reach a balanced budget sufficient to meet community demands on services. A number of service level enhancements were included within the budget alongside several minor capital initiatives, which are noted within the operating budget detail from the February 14th meeting. Wilmot continues our commitment to a culture with health and safety at its core. The operating budget includes an expanded investment in health and safety training and personal protective equipment of over $79,000. While operating revenues are, sorry, next slide. Yeah. Just let the slides catch up here, I think. And go forward right there. That's good. Thank you. Yeah, while operating revenues are anticipated to improve over last year, rental activities are projected to still be approximately $300,000 below pre-COVID activity levels. Staff continue to advocate on behalf of all 4 rural townships on the province's OMPF reference group. However, the 15% annual reduction is anticipated to continue for the next several years, underscoring again the importance of our dedicated infrastructure levy to meet asset management objectives. Next slide, please. The majority of costs and operating revenues shaded in blue shaded in green, continue to come from parks, facilities, and recreation services, predominantly with the Wilmot Recreation Complex. Under the leadership of Ms. Jackson, staff continue to control costs and promote operational efficiencies as they continue to endure the impacts of COVID-19 on recreation revenues. Public Works represents the next largest proportion of operating expenses in order to maintain a large network of hard surface roads throughout the construction season and the winter season. Remainder of expenditures are distributed from an operating perspective, distributed amongst general government, protective services, cultural services, and development services. Next slide, please. The municipal grants program was also included in the budget. There will be a presentation following this on the allocations under that program. Approximately $65,000 in grant funding will be distributed under that program. On behalf of the committee and council, I can say that we're very thankful for the tireless efforts of community volunteers, especially throughout the pandemic. Next slide, please. Outside of levy-funded operations, the township's 3 user pay divisions budgets were also endorsed by the committee. Cemetery services are projected to have a modest surplus in 2022, though activity levels obviously are highly unpredictable. Building services projected to once again require a net draw from reserve funds to balance 2022 operating requirements. And future years of residential, commercial, and industrial growth should help to eliminate the current deficit within this user-funded reserve fund. Next slide, please. The township's utility budget totals $6.4 million with a net transfer to infrastructure reserves of just over $1 million. Water and sanitary rates have been increased by 2.90%, and the average bi-monthly bill based on 31 cubic meters will increase by $5.40 to just over $192. Next slide, please. This just is the split of the utilities division operating expenses. You can see the majority is still to the region of Waterloo for water distribution and sanitary treatment, with 52% of the costs. Remaining costs are spread amongst staffing, operating costs, with 17% put towards future infrastructure investments. Next slide, please. So this slide just wraps up the entire budget. So it was built through the collaborative efforts of all departments, continues to reflect our strategic priorities and core mandates of good governance through fiscal responsibility. And I'd like to just take a moment to thank staff that are present tonight and those across the organization who were key inputs into this process. Generating a balanced budget is definitely not easy in the current operating environment. But through teamwork, we achieved a strong, balanced budget that's forward thinking. A special thanks to my team in corporate services for all the work they do day in, day out behind the scenes to make this possible. And lastly, thanks to Council for your support through a challenging budget and your continued desire to meet the service level expectations of Wilmot in a manner that's fiscally responsible and balanced. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mayor Armstrong and open to any questions from Council.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I too want to express my sincere thanks to you and your staff, all of the team that are present and all of staff all the way down through the ranks as they all work hard to make these kind of budgets possible and for us to have such a great place to live. Thank you again. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yeah, I'm going to echo your comments there too, Mayor Armstrong. Every department really has done a fantastic job controlling costs, especially in the environments that we have right now with COVID and all the stuff thrown at you. It's been really difficult. I know I'm imagining Ms. Jackson having to change her thinking continuously with COVID. Do we open the rec center? Do we close it? Ms. Locke the same way. Do we open the castle? Do we not? And it's certainly challenging. The presentation you had tonight there, Mr. Kelly, I thought was quite engaging, and I particularly like the showing the 5 categories: responsible government, community engagement, economic prosperity, environmental protection, and quality of life. To me, this shows residents that we are listening, and those are very important things to all of us. So thank you so much for all the hard work that everybody's put in.
Ms. Chambers.
Thank you. And Councillor Fisher, you did give me a very good segue, because as you will see, the 2022 budget does include an extensive amount of work that really prepares us for growth in the future, but also advancing those strategic goals of the township. And those are what you identified there. So, over the next month or a few weeks, I will be working with the corporate leadership team to really refocus on the strategic plan. And we're looking to build departmental business plans that will not only discuss the capital projects that we have and how they align with those strategic goals, but also looking at the operational activities that we undertake every day and how they advance the strategic goals of the corporation as well. So we'll be bringing that to council in the coming weeks, and I look forward to having that discussion on how we are going to be together moving the township forward. So with that, I do want to thank staff as well and council for a very smooth budget process. I know it's not always easy to balance that, but I think we've got a good body of work that really helps to move us forward as an organization and as a township. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. Did you want to speak again, or there we go? Okay, Madam Clerk, if you would read the recommendation, please.
That the 2022 municipal budget dated February 14th, 2022, as recommended by the Ad Hoc Budget Advisory Committee, be approved. And further, that the Director of Corporate Services / Treasurer be authorized to prepare the necessary levying bylaw to raise $9,920,999 for township purposes from general taxation.
Thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? That's moved by Councillor Gerber, second by Councillor Hallman. Are there no further questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. Job well done to all of staff and council. Good job, folks. So the next item on our agenda is the 2022 Municipal Grants Program. Was approved by the ad hoc budget advisory committee and incorporated within the overall municipal budget. This year's total allotment is over $65,000. It is my pleasure to announce the successful funding recipients under this year's program. Starting with Wilmot Horticultural Society to support the purchase of plant materials, speakers for monthly events, and the Junior Gardeners Program. Next is the Wilmot Agricultural Society to help cover costs of the new Hamburg Fall Fair, which will hopefully we can do this year. Next is the Interfaith Community Counseling to provide subsidies for low-income individuals and families for counseling services. Wilmot Family Resource Center to assist in maintaining existing levels of service and expansion of services provided to children, youth during COVID-19 recovery period. Allocation also supports the continuation of the Indigenous Worker Program. Community care concepts to maintain existing programs offered to seniors and adults with disabilities living in Wilmot Township. Waterloo Oxford District Secondary School to fund the Waterloo Oxford Citizenship Awards. School Safety Patrollers, annual contribution towards the recognition of school safety patrollers across the region. Wilmot Seniors Woodworking and Craft Center to assist in offsetting the costs to repair machinery and equipment. New Hamburg Firebirds to help maintain a program of junior hockey excellence and offset rising operational costs. Wilmot Terry Fox Run to support marketing and promotion of the Wilmot Terry Fox Run and other related fundraising events through the year. Nith Valley Eco Boosters to assist with costs to hold environmentally focused events, including guest speakers and environmental films. Wilmot Recreation and Culture Financial Assistance Program to replenish funds held in trust to assist families in need of support to register for community recreation and cultural programs. New Hamburg Concert Band to repair and maintain musical equipment and purchase music and supplies. Forest Glen Public School Council to assist with continued building of natural play area within the grounds of Forest Glen Public School. For these groups and all the dedicated volunteers throughout the township, we are truly grateful for your commitment to improving the quality of life in Wilmot. We thank you very much. So the next item is the third ice pad and parks operation center final report. Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong and members of council. Good evening. I believe Mr. Desai is here. Maybe we can get you to turn your camera on if you are. And I'll do an introduction while we wait for that. So staff are pleased to present the fourth report since early 2020 regarding the need for and preferred location of a third ice pad for Wilmot Township residents. The first report confirmed the need for a third ice pad, which supported the 2013 Parks and Rec Master Plan. I'm probably taking a little bit of Mr. Desai's thunder here, but the second and third reports provided detailed feedback from consultation that Monteith Brown conducted with user groups. and the further results of an online engagement with the general public regarding the preferred location of the third rink. And then this report tonight wraps up the work that Monteith Brown was commissioned to complete on behalf of the township and the community. And it presents their findings in a final report, which includes a high-level capital budget, operating costs, and a basic fit-out conceptual design that will be fully developed upon approval of this report and hiring of a design bid build team or architect team. And then in addition, this report also provides a high-level capital budget and basic design concept for future development of our new parks and facilities operations site. And Mr. Desai is here, as I mentioned, to present the final report and their findings over the past 2 years of work on this project. And I'd like to thank him before he begins. It's been great working with Monteith Brown on this project, and all the hard work that you have done with your team is greatly appreciated. And I just also want to mention that Mr. Jeff Dubrick and Ms. Manny O'Krafka are here tonight with me as well. They've been working on the project in the background and are available as required. And I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Desai, to do your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jackson. Those were very kind words, and the sentiment is mutual in terms of our ability to work with township staff across multiple departments. So thank you all very much. And Mr. Mayor, members of council, I appreciate you having myself back here tonight to bring you back up to speed on the work that has been completed over the last number of months by both Monteith Brown, and again, my name is Anand Desai. I'm an associate with the firm, and I'm here on behalf of our other consulting team members, which included Cornerstone Architecture and Wickens Green Space Consultants. So next slide, please. So as a reminder to council, the intent of the studies were somewhat twofold, as Director Jackson has just alluded to. From an arena perspective, the location study was intended to determine the optimal site for a third ice pad, and we evaluated 3 options, which were presented to council back in November of this 2021. And at which time council gave us direction to proceed with looking at the WRC for that third ice pad. And then the second part of our scope of work included the parks operations site, largely to evaluate whether or not the Wilmot Recreation Complex could continue to effectively function as a parks operations center, both in light of arena expansion potential, but also, and perhaps more importantly, your ability as a township to keep pace with growth and deliver the services efficiently and effectively. Next slide, please. So to bring council back up to speed, just in terms of the process timeline, really the origins of this process, in fact, date back to 2017 when Township Council adopted the Parks, Facilities, and Recreation Services Master Plan. That involved broad-based consultation with a wide range of community members and the general public, of which case arena users were part of that. And that master plan, at that time identified the need for a third ice pad in the Township of Wilmot. So subsequently, in October 2020, you as council received and approved the indoor arena usage and needs analysis update, which in fact recommended that third ice pad. And then in February of 2021, we initiated the location studies for both the arena and the operations center. Following a lengthy, nobody wants to think back to the time when we were fully locked down, especially Director Jackson, I'm sure. But after that lengthy lockdown, we were able to gain access to the facility, both the WRC, the New Hamburg Community Center, and other locations for the Parks Ops study. In November, we presented the preliminary findings report to yourselves, which identified the WRC as that preferred location, and then tested that with through a broader community consultation process, of which you received a summary in December from Director Jackson and other township staff. And that allowed us through really January and February come up with the conceptual analysis and costing that's in the report. Next slide, please. So just again, as a reminder, we talked to a number of your major arena users, as well as users that are either at the WRC or the New Hamburg Community Center. And so in addition to those interviews, which built on interviews that we held back in as part of the phase 1 back in 2020, through this process, we received 362 written forms from the public as well. And ultimately found that the user groups and the public are generally supportive of the township's decision to explore a third ice pad, and then reinforced the support for the WRC as the preferred location among the majority of those that responded. The New Hamburg Community Center was the secondary preference, although some had suggested that it could become a practice rink or a dryland training facility. And all of the arena user groups supported an NHL regulation ice pad with a minimum of 6 dressing rooms, seating typical of a community rink, and adequate storage. Next slide, please. In terms of why the WRC was recommended as that preferred location, again, this was somewhat presented back to council in November, so I won't go over this slide in its complete detail, but the nuts and bolts of it are it's a newer facility, allowing for financial and programming efficiencies by co-locating multiple ice pads on one site, and then again benefiting from the heavy foot traffic and its role as your premier recreational destination in the township. And certainly among the public and the user groups, its central location and proximity to that 7-8 corridor was extremely important, and it was as a modern building designed with barrier-free accessibility and building code standards in mind. Next slide, please. So when our architectural team looked at the existing site, they were able to look at how a new ice pad could be situated on the site, while also looking at some of the other concerns and opportunities that the user groups had told us about. So within this addition, and I'll get to the inside details in a moment, one of the things that we heard from the user groups was that certainly during peak hours, vehicular circulation in the existing traffic or parking lot is somewhat challenging, especially when it comes to pickup and drop off. And so our architects have looked at how to potentially not only address the parking requirements of the new ice pad, but also look at the internal vehicular circulation, and have added a drop-off lane, which is hoped to improve efficiency and safety of the parking lot area. The soccer fields, really the architects, again, from a parking perspective, were cognizant of trying to retain all 3 fields, but with expanded parking, there is now space. We have been able to retain space for 2 full-size soccer fields. So that could be more soccer fields than that if going to more of an intermediate size or for smaller play, or built as to continue to retain as 2 full-size and cross-programmed as is typically done. Next slide, please. And then the interior plan in terms of the concept, the new rink is the one I'm seeing on the bottom of the screen. Really, it would be that NHL regulation ice pad and 6 dressing rooms that the user groups all told us was important to them. Seating would be provided above the change rooms, again, as a community-based rink, probably about 100 seats, plus warm viewing. A new connection from the lobby, and then allowances for additional storage, which again, groups mentioned to us as being something that would be a very desirable amenity. Next slide, please. So in terms of the Parks Operations Center, because it would not be possible to really have a Parks Operations Center continuing to be, ideal in tandem with a third ice pad, we have recommended the acquisition of a centrally located site for a new operations center. It would really require probably a minimum of 1 acre for a 10,000 square foot building. That again, in consultation with your parks and facilities operations staff and others in that department, we have been able to accommodate those. But we would note that 1 acre, probably is a bit of a minimum that we would suggest. Acquiring a larger parcel certainly would allow for you as a township to expand to address any kind of future growth needs, but locking in the purchase at today's real estate levels. Next slide, please. So largely in conclusion, the next steps in the process would be to allocate funding to begin the detailed design for the arena expansion, initiating a site selection study for a new property for the Parks and Facilities Operations Center, again, I hope preferably in a central location, and then tendering detailed design and construction for both projects, after those kind of processes have unfolded. The estimated cost of construction, really based in 2021 dollars, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the whole COVID volatility that perhaps is really affecting prices. But our cost estimates are $15.5 million for the ice pad, and the operations center, again, depending on its kind of configuration, topography, and ultimate size, could range between $2.9 to $3.6 million. Both of those projects, or a portion of them at least, would be development charge eligible. And we have made allowances for, again, based on some of the feedback we heard from Council in November, allowances for net zero or LEED elements, just from an overall green building or building sustainability perspective. So next slide, please. So with that, we would be, again, happy to take any questions of Council, and we wish you all the best in terms of implementation, should that happen tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was very good. Thank you. Councillor Gordick, you have a question. You're muted, Councillor.
Thank you for that. I thought I hit it better. So not sure who to direct this to, but as most of Council and those that perhaps are watching, is we had an issue with the MZO with regards to our township, and that highlighted a particular safety concern within our community of the Alpine factory. And currently our rec complex is our emergency center, which also sits in the evacuation zone. So I'm not quite sure how we have an emergency center also within an evacuation zone. So my concern is what kind of due diligence did we do prior to, of course, I did not know what I did not know in November when I said, yeah, third ice pad is great. Use the facilities because then we can, work with what we have. However, knowing that the ice pad sits within that explosion zone, for lack of a better word, because I don't know what would happen. I'm concerned about the safety aspect, and that being our safety emergency center. What kind of due diligence do we have for allowing a third ice pad to already be built in an area that's potentially in that danger zone for our residents?
Perhaps from a due diligence standpoint, I guess perhaps this is probably better directed to township staff in terms of the specifics of the ammonia plant.
Ms. Jackson?
Thank you, Mayor. So first of all, of course, we all know I wasn't here when the facility was built, so I don't have all of the background information with respect to the proximity of the plant. I can tell you that the rinks have been there now for 15 years. They were built in 2007. And according to staff, there have not been any incidents at all during that time with respect to the Alpine plant. I can also tell you that each year Alpine sends us a safety plan that outlines, it's a binder about yay thick, and it outlines their whole safety process. And we also have included in our emergency plan for the facility what to do if we do get a call from Alpine that they've had some kind of an incident with respect to a chemical leak or something like that. And it's built right into our emergency plan for the WRC, and staff are trained on that on a regular basis. So I really can't comment on what the decisions were back 15 years ago, but I can say that the location that Mr. Desai showed you will be further away from the existing rinks. So I don't feel that adding to the existing location creates any more of a risk than what we are currently situated in, but there's been no incidents that I have been reported. in the 15 years it's been in operation, that the rinks have been in operation. So I really can't offer much more than that. Unfortunately, I don't have as much background. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Not really, but I appreciate what you're saying is that it just takes one explosion. So, I mean, people often, like there was one just recently in the States that happened. But I get that we haven't had anything for 15 years. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen tomorrow. But my concern is that it is our emergency center. And if, regardless of whether or not we have a safety plan in place, how do we have this emergency center in the danger zone? And the provincial guidelines, like it's within the 1,000 meters of being in dangerous air pollution if there was an explosion at Alpine. So is it too late in the process, I guess, for us, instead of continually adding on to a situation just because we've done something in the past doesn't mean we should continue going forward? Is it too late in the process to look at a third option away from the exclusion zone of our emergency center? I'm just, for me, that's a concern that I never knew was there until we had this MZO situation brought forward to us. And the maps that we have received from the community members that have done the work to highlight some of the concerns with Alpine, the rec complex is within the 1,000 meters of a danger area.
So through the mayor, if you'd like, I can indicate that if you're when you're saying emergency center, you're referring to an evacuation center. If we have okay, so and I believe Mr. Leeson's on the call, and without trying to put him too much on the spot, an evacuation center can move around. It doesn't have to be in one. It depends on where the situation is. So we have many other facilities in the township that can be used for evacuation centers, and for folks to come to if there's some kind of a major issue. I see the chief has his hand up, so maybe I'll defer to him to support on this one.
Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. To that point, Ms. Jackson is correct. Based on the emergency that we're dealing with at the time, what part of the community is impacted, we would have to move people to or from an area accordingly to that emergency, and we would pivot to those different areas as per. I think it's important to understand the dynamics of Alpine and what exactly they have there. So this would probably be a deeper conversation, not in this forum, but there are some things that I wouldn't want to disclose on this discussion because of safety concerns from Alpine. With all due respect to that organization, any information I've ever seen from them, they're incredibly safe, very safety conscientious. The most notable item they have on their property is anhydrous ammonia. Excuse me. They don't have some of the things that you traditionally mix with fertilizer to cause explosions, as you're referring to. Those things do not exist on that property. So I think our discussion would be a little different if we had an opportunity to talk about what the risks and hazards truly exist at Alpine. There are also a number of setbacks that I'm hearing about, different, how many meters do I have to be from this and that. Existing facilities such as Alpine meet different standards versus a new build. There's a ton of different agencies involved and a lot of different information that would have to be collated in order to give you a direct answer to your question. And I would probably need more information myself even. And then we'd probably have to bring development services in, and Ms. Jackson would need more time to answer some of these questions too. So I hope that helps a little bit. It's a really complicated question to answer in this forum, to be perfectly honest.
I understand that it's difficult, but it's difficult for me to not think about the what ifs. This was something that, as I said, was not actually brought forward until our MZO situation, and I don't know what I don't know. And I'm all for our community and building an ice pad. I'm hesitant to add to a structure that we already know is in a danger zone. So that's what I'm trying to get at. For me, I'm having a moral decision on that third pad being added. I'm okay with a third pad somewhere else. And I'm just wondering where we are in the process to evaluate that from a safety perspective. And so for me, that's a big issue. Yeah. Wondering if any of the other council members have any opinion about this. Like, I mean, to me, it's a big issue. Alpine has been a great supporter of our community, and I am wanting to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our community.
Councillor Hellman, you have a comment?
Thank you through the mayor. Thanks, Councillor Gordick. You know, as you said, that we didn't know what we didn't know till we now do. So I'm just wondering if perhaps maybe the clerk or maybe the CAO could comment on my question. Is it possible to add an addition to the resolution to this evening, should it pass, that we ask for the municipality and whatever departments need to be involved to review the questions that Councillor Gordick has brought up, and just to make sure that that is clarified and community safety is put first before, just to make sure those T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, so to speak, and public safety is put first and foremost.
Ms. Middleholtz, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. So by no means can I ever speak on behalf of every single senior management team member. However, I will say that we always put the community safety ahead of everything else. So I would just like to point that little piece out. However, in terms of the resolution, this is Council's resolution. So you have the ability to amend a resolution essentially almost however you wish. These are decisions that are Council's. However, as staff, we provide you with recommendations, we provide you with advice. So perhaps the CAO may have something additional she wishes to say, but as from a clerk's perspective, procedural bylaw, parliamentary law, once you have moved and seconded, it is Council's resolution to do with as you wish.
Follow up, Mayor?
Pardon?
Oh, just asking the mayor for a follow-up to your comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. To be very clear, I'm not suggesting that staff would never do that. So I want to make sure that that statement is very clear. I'm just saying when new knowledge is given, you go with what you've got. So when I'm looking at the resolution, just to have this discussion, and I don't know who wants to chime in, but just the staff be directed to proceed with the plans for hiring a design/build team for the third ice pad project located at the Wilmot Rec Complex as outlined in the 2022 capital budget. I'm just suggesting that perhaps to satisfy everyone that it could be amended to include that the aspect of operational using having reevaluating a safety plan, or having this go to our solicitor just to confirm those issues. I'm not sure what is the best route. I'm just suggesting that perhaps there's a way to satisfy that community interest to ensure that that's been addressed.
Mayor Armstrong, if I may. Thank you. So the first step, first of all, is for somebody to move the recommendation, to have a seconder. And then at that point, somebody can bring forward, propose an amendment, make a motion to amend the main motion, where you could include some sort of language like that. Again, I see the CAO has her hand up. This is a very complex topic. More so than just our solicitor, also our insurance pool as well, I believe would probably be part of it. So I think it would be better to sort of defer the rest of this question to her.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so council has raised some questions this evening that, staff is not able to answer immediately because, they're more technical of nature, and we would have to look into those things. If council as a whole, a consensus feels that they would like to see some additional due diligence review before finalizing this recommendation or approving this recommendation this evening, you could amend the motion to add a clause to say pending a review of the proximity to the of safety concerns related to the proximity of the Alpine site, something of that nature, which would allow you to move forward in principle, but we would have to report back on those concerns. But again, that's a consensus of council. If you feel those are concerns you would like to have addressed, then that's something that that you can direct staff to do as part of this recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'd be okay with that. Either that or even deferring until we get more information and bring it back, if that would be easier. Either or.
Ms. Chambers, did you want to add something or?
I'm just wondering if, not to put Mr. Desai on the spot, but when you're normally doing site selection, at what point do you sort of typically look at this type of detailed, I guess, site review in terms of adjacent uses and things like that?
Yeah, I can respond through you, Mr. Mayor. Our site selection is, it doesn't get into like geotechnical or a detailed analysis of individual land uses. I mean, we certainly look at the land use designations around, whether or not they're compatible, what the existing use on the site is, in this case, recreation. And so again, as an established use, at least from our perspective, it made a lot of sense. And then again, I certainly appreciate that, there's new information that has come to light, as Councillor Gordick has said, with respect to this. And I guess really it is that question that she asked. I mean, ultimately, whether that site stays as an evacuation center, are you as a township going to continue to have people visiting the splash pad that's there and use the soccer fields and all those other established uses? I think, introducing another recreational facility, I understand, it's adding to the site that's, pressing that, concern of hers. But what I can say is, again, yeah, I don't have the technical expertise to determine like blast radius or ammonia release or anything like that. So, I'll be completely honest that was not part of our, evaluation. But what I will say is that, again, as an established use that's been in operation for 15 years, that is your premier recreational center. From a recreational perspective, from a fiscal perspective, an operational perspective, our site selection, was presented to council, and we proceeded on the basis that the WRC was that kind of preferred concept. So again, in response also to Councillor Gordick's question, I mean, from our perspectives, we are pretty much at the end of our original scope of work, having run through the process. And I think the options that the CAO and Councillor Hallman have just, identified, where there's still another kind of design process that has to go underway. And perhaps there's an opportunity there to, undertake whatever requisite studies the council and whatever other means are necessary to undertake it as part of that process in order to keep the timeline moving. But that would be just my thoughts.
Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I would certainly move the recommendation to get it to the floor, and at that time support the wording to, pending the necessary assurances that the location is safe. I don't see that being a long drawn out process, but I think it makes sense to do so in the name of public safety. I know I live on Hamilton Road, which is not far from where Alpine used to be when it was located right in the middle of New Hamburg. So I too believe that, where we are with the rec center is probably the right spot, but nothing wrong with checking into that and just making sure that that is indeed the case. So no worries with adding that, that requirement to make sure that's the case. And I don't anticipate it being a lengthy process, but that's why we're going to go through it, I suppose. So I will move the motion with that recommendation added.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Fisher? Ms. Chambers, you have another comment?
Oh, sorry, just slow on the hand.
Okay, thank you. So I think probably part of that we would have to have, if there is a recommendation that there needs to be a change, there'll definitely be a change to the cost of the facility. So that if that comes back that it's recommended that there needs to be it needs to be moved, then we would also, I think, need to have the costs involved as well. So that would need to be updated as well, I think. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to be clear that the ice pad is an important component to our community, and I'm all in favor of that. However, the last month and a half of having the community reach out to us and wanting us to do better, and some of the questions that were raised have put me in a position where I feel that I need to do this. And so for the community groups that are watching tonight, this is not about the ice pad per se. I just wanted to make that clear with regards to wanting that pad for the community. I did want to, though, point out that according to the provincial guidelines, just so that people are aware of where I'm coming from, is that Alpine is an Ontario Class 2 area of influence, and the rec complex fits it within Zone C, which is a 1,000-meter exclusion zone where ammonia gas plumes can reach a concentration of 300 parts per million, is considered immediately dangerous to life and health by Fertilizer Canada. So it's not that I'm trying to be a stick in the mud. I just would like people to sort of at least understand where I'm coming from and my concerns with the information that has now come to hand that I did not know in November when the recommendation was brought forward for adding an ice pad to the already existing rec complex. So I would like to also agree that we make a recommendation to amend the motion to ask for further studies before we actually vote on this going forward. Thank you.
Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I just have two comments that I wish to make. First of all, Councillor Gordick noted that you are moving a motion, much to what CAO Chambers commented, and that would be adding at the end of the second paragraph, pending report back from staff relative to safety concerns relating to the proximity of the Nature's Alpine plant. Additionally, I would like to point out that we do have two delegations waiting in the wings who are looking to provide comment tonight. So I just wanted to bring that back to Council's attention. At some point, we do need to hear from the delegations. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, you wanted to comment before we go to the delegations?
Thank you. Just I just want to comment that we have a lot of users who are using the facility, and I'm worried about the fear that might be coming out of some of the discussion tonight. And I just want to reassure the community that we will look into this and we take this seriously, and that we want to make sure we have the right information before we move forward. That is definitely the township's priority. And I probably will reach out to Alpine. We have a relationship with them. As I mentioned earlier, they provide safety information to us. I want to make sure that they're aware of the concerns and that we can address this properly so that it doesn't spiral out of control with people's fears. So I just wanted to make that comment that we will look into this and make sure that that we do the best we can to gather the information to provide back to council.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to our delegations. The first delegation is Mr. Nathan Joseph. Welcome, Nathan. You have 7 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, my name is Nathan Joseph. I'm currently president of New Hamburg Minor Hockey. And I had some questions for Mr. Desai. Mr. Desai, you had presented in the past about provisions for potential future fourth ice pad. With this layout that you presented today, is there any space at the WRC for a potential fourth ice pad to be added post 2031 as per your projected needs analysis report?
Just let me intervene here. Nathan, as a delegation, you're not here to ask questions of staff. You're here to make a presentation. And so once that has happened, then state your concerns and what you want or don't want with the project.
Okay, yeah, from our concerns was from the report presented back in November was that the WRC location would be considered with the third ice pad being built with provisions for a fourth. So our concern is that in the report that was presented today, we did not see in the design layout a potential provision for a fourth ice pad, or where that would be located at the WRC. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. I think that's something that you'll take up with staff as a result of this, that they would be able to answer it, because what we're taking is the comments on the existing. And if that's your comment, your concern that the fourth ice pad was not mentioned, then that'll go back to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Our next delegation is Mr. Brian Poff. Is Mr. There he is. Welcome, Brian. You're currently muted.
Yes, there we go.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can't see you,
Okay.
but we can hear you.
Okay. So I have 7 minutes, but I want to make a comment at the end based on the discussions on the third pad that I've heard tonight, but I'm going to go through my presentation now. So I'm representing the Junior C hockey team. Junior hockey has enjoyed a rich history in the township. The team was established in 1953 and has operated continuously since that time, which means we are celebrating our 70th anniversary next year. The secret to our survival as an organization has been the strong support from the community, businesses that sponsor us, the fan base that supports us, and the township that gives us the facilities that we need. We are also fortunate to have started play in a new arena that featured a bowl-style structure with seating on all four sides and a seating capacity of 1,500 people, which was an amazing considering that our population at the time was under 4,000. So in 2000, around 2000, 50 years later, we started to hear about the need for a second ice pad. Where it could be put, what space would be needed, and parking concerns. And it was determined that the New Hamburg location was not suitable to add further. So the decision was made by council that we would need new lands somewhere else in the township. Lucky we had two business people who offered free land. And the one that was chosen was property that the WRC sits on now, that was donated by Mr. Harold Schmidt and his wife. And that was why the council decided to build on that location. The reason was all the growth within the township was going to be between New Hamburg and Baden, and that has come true. That is where the growth is. By 2005, the decision was finally made that we were going to go ahead with the build. The design was completed and a public meeting was held to review those plans. We asked what the capacity would be, and we were told that the design would be an arena with seats on one side only and a capacity of 750 seats. We were a little dismayed with that decision at that time. We were going to arena with 1,500 seats down to arena with 750. Half of the capacity. So we asked if they could reconsider before the build started. We were told it was too late in the process and the change to make any changes to the plan. In other words, we're going ahead. That was back in 2007 then when the new arena opened up. So here we are now 15 years later. The capacity limits still exist and have become an even more problem as the population and the fan base has increased significantly since the arena was built. Also, after we moved to the new facility, we soon learned that the sight lines in both of the new ice pads were very poor and make it very difficult to see the entire surface. We still get all kinds of complaints and comments that any future facilities, including the new ice pad that's being considered, must be built and need to address the capacity and sight line problems. So here we are today. The user group is asking to be part of the planning process as early as possible. We don't want to reach the same point where we are again told that it's too late to change the process and make changes. So we have two options for a new arena that we feel will meet the requirements and will deserve the township well now and will serve the township well now into the future. Option number one, and the most desirable option for a third rink, would be build a bowl type arena with adequate capacity to meet the growing needs of the township now and for the next 30 to 40 years. It should also be noted that this is our last opportunity to build a pad that is linked to the current structure on the current site because of limited space available. A perfect example of the type of arena we need is the new arena that was built recently in air that has seating of 1,200 and a total capacity with standing room of up to 1,500. So we're suggesting that that would be a site where you could go and actually see a building exactly what we're looking for. However, there is a second option. That second option, we believe, is less expensive, but still viable. It is to expand the current shout pad by adding an additional 500 to 600 seats to the west side of the pad as part of this project. This would help to partially address both the capacity issue and the poor sightline issues that exist with our two pads now. So our user group is willing and ready to help in any way we can, and we hope to be part of the planning process and to work with the township to build a facility that will meet everyone's needs now and in the future, and one that we all will be proud of. So I'm using my time up, but I want to make one comment. It was stated that the user groups were in favor of a third ice pad that was only considered to be a practice pad and with limited seating. That is not true. And I think what happened in the process where the consultants went to the user groups, they didn't ask what they wanted. What they asked was, if we build a third pad, how much ice time do you think you will be willing to use? The Firebirds stated that we would not use any extra time at all. They are able to go to Plattsville and have 4 sessions for the price of 1 in the New Hamburg facility. So for the Firebirds to build just a practice arena does not solve all the problems that occurred with the previous build in 2007.
Okay, Brian, we'll have to cut you there. You're well past your time.
Right.
Councillor Holman.
Thank you, through the mayor. So first off, I feel that the New Hamburg Hockey Association deserves an answer to that question. So I'm hoping that Mr. Desai can unmute, and I will ask the question about the consideration of the 4th pad, and if you can just unpack that process and what eliminated it. And I feel that that's a good transparent conversation for the community to hear.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hallman. Absolutely. So in 2020, when the first phase of this study was prepared to provide council with direction on the need for ice pads, or confirm the need for the number of ice pads, the projection was that 1 ice pad in the short term, so really within the next 2 to 3 years, and potential if current market capture rates, the same percentage of people playing hockey, figure skating, all that kind of thing, in line with if you attain the population growth that you're expecting over the longer term, there could be that potential for a 4th ice pad being required in the future. But the recommendation was to build a 3rd ice pad so as to not potentially overbuild your supply. In the event, Wilmot right now is, a strong hockey and ice sports center. You're bucking national, provincial, and regional trends in that respect. But we are certainly cognizant that, Canada and Ontario and across KW and the Greater Golden Horseshoe, ice sport participation rates are in somewhat of a decline. But we went conservatively and assumed that your penetration rates would remain strong. But based on that, it's a long-term demand. So that is the reason why we, in this concept, are going by what the phase 1 report stated, which was to provide that 3rd ice pad in the short term. With respect to its ability, the sites of the WRC's ability to accommodate a potential 4th if required in 2031, it would appear, again, based on strictly land, that you have space there. But again, it's going to come at the expense of something. And there are also, since we looked into it based on drawings we received, there are easements from the ministry, the provincial ministry. So, that could encumber, any kind of expansion. So I guess in response to the question, really, we are recommending that you build your supply. One of the things that I think the most important point that we've heard from the public and user groups since this process began back in 2017, reaffirmed through the 2020 update and again through the 2021 consultations, is that people are looking for ice, and they don't want to travel outside your community to access it. And so, really that is the rationale for showing 3 ice pads, because we do feel that, building 4, if that is the question, why we're not building 4, we feel that building 4 right now would, it comes at a cost and a risk that you are potentially overbuilding for something that the demand isn't here just yet.
A follow-up, Mayor? Thank you for that explanation. That was helpful for me. So I just want to clarify something. So so the need is showing that, and I have I full disclosure, have a 10-year-old who plays, and so I live quite a bit of time at the arena. So I can see that there's absolutely a need, and I'm aware that we are in our municipality, we are not the provincial trend for what's needed. But I'm just looking for your input on, with that information and knowing what we're experiencing in Wilmot, and you're looking at that, what would be your suggested time frame that council, even at that time, should be really looking at this for a 4th pad? What does that evaluation process look like, in your opinion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, back to Councillor Hallman. We heard today through your budget presentation that your Parks, Facilities and Recreation Services master plan will be updated within the next year. Again, that's one step that will involve broad-based consultation. That master plan will have the benefit of 2021 census data, for example, across the socio-demographic spectrum. Your official plan work, and your population forecast, your DC work, will shed a whole new light in terms of future growth projections. And if you're hitting, where you thought you were kind of pre-COVID, because we know, COVID slowed things down, not only from a building and a housing perspective, and I know some of it's, rebounded, but, COVID has also impacted, again, recreation and sport across the spectrum. So, again, we're confident in the original projection model. I think in speaking to township staff through this process, as much as there's been lockdowns and arena restrictions, demand seems to be coming back in your community. But ultimately, if your growth continues at the trajectory that we have been, working with your approved population forecast, it really is that kind of year 2031. And so, you don't want to necessarily, when you build your 3rd ice pad, you're going to know pretty quickly in terms of how quickly it's being filled. Are there excess times, or are people still having to travel outside your community? And that's, that's very concerning, if it's at the minor level. Adults are more mobile. So I think, it's a law. This is your short-term action. And, before we get into the 4th, we need to kind of, make sure that we're not overbuilding something that's going to come at a multi-million-dollar cost to build. And again, over the course of its next 40-year operating cycle, will also be millions of dollars from operating. So we want to make sure, we're fiscally appropriate that way.
That was a very helpful answer. Thank you for that. I'm not sure who can take my next question. My next question is regarding the seating discussion that was raised by Mr. Poff. Is that something that staff looked at, or that Mr. Desai looked at with this project? Was that something that came up, and what does that look like if we were to have to add seating? How does that look?
Yeah, and I can take a first crack at that, and township staff can jump in if they would like. But back in when we consulted the user groups, so after the 3rd ice pad was rationalized, Really we tested kind of what they might want to use the arena for, how much time they would want to use the arena, in a given week. And really the prominent theme that came across from, again, the 2017 master plan, the 2020 consultations, as well as the 2021 consultations with user groups was, again, we need that third ice pad. And that was the priority that was emphasized to us. We heard a lot about, again, we did, and I would just want to clarify, we never called it a practice pad. This is an NHL regulation ice pad that we're proposing through this concept, with 6 change rooms. So it is a, full programming ice pad, but intended for community-oriented programs. So from a seating perspective, that was not necessarily emphasized, throughout the consultations, being anything needed more than kind of what would be standard for a community rink. The Firebirds, I will acknowledge, when we talked about, different sites that an arena could be located, when we spoke about the WRC, it was more logistical. And like Mr. Pfaff had mentioned, I think around sight lines, but also, just general viewing. It was nothing about, I guess, expanded seating at the WRC. But in fairness to the Firebirds, they said, if you are going to look at a new site altogether, they did say, almost that Mike Holmes do it right kind of mentality. In an ideal world, I guess, maybe not a do it right mentality, but in an ideal world from the Firebirds perspective, the comment was made, if we're going to a brand new site, building a brand new arena, a bowl would be appropriate. But again, in consultation with the broad spectrum of user groups, they are looking for, at least they indicated to us, that they are looking for a community-oriented rink. I think, if there's opportunities to improve sight lines in your existing shout pad, maybe that is something that needs to be looked at, because again, Mr. Pfaff was correct that if you are looking at, expanding, we've identified a cost of $15.5 million for this new build as a community rink. It is not unreasonable to think that, adding, making it essentially an event rink would be a multi-million-dollar addition to that. So we just don't know that we, see that need as strong as we see the need for that community-oriented rink.
Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Armstrong. I see Ms. Jackson. Did you wish to comment before I do?
Sure, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Gerber. I just wanted to add to what Mr. Desai mentioned, and I believe Councillor Holman, you were looking for some information with respect to adding seating to the existing scout pad as well, which was referenced by Mr. Pfaff. That structure is what's called a Balin building, and the exterior walls actually span the full, and Councillor Gerber may know this as well. I believe you were on the committee when it was designed. Sorry to put you on the spot, but it is called full span engineering. So the roof actually sits on the outside walls of the 2 rinks. So in order to add something to one of those outside walls, we would have to lift off the roof, essentially. And I'm no architect or engineer, but that would be a very challenging task to look at adding seating to that space, is what I understand. So I just wanted to add that context, but that is something we can definitely verify when we bring a design team on board and get that official word from them once they review the existing structure. So I wouldn't take my word as the gospel, but that is my understanding of the way the structure is designed. So thank you.
Can I interject, Mr. Mayor? Thank you. Just because with Ms. Jackson mentioning that, when you do that with the team, can you find out how long, just when they're doing these numbers for us for council, how long the whole facility would be not usable if that were to be a scenario, just to evaluate that all into that data would be appreciated.
Through the mayor, sure, can do that for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you through Mayor Armstrong. Thanks to Mr. Joseph and for Mr. Poff for presenting to us tonight. You have a couple comments as far as just perspectives on what we heard and also perspectives on what's in the report. First of all, the parcel of land that the WRC sits on right now was actually purchased from the Finney brothers. Mayor Armstrong, you'd remember that as you were there as well. The Schmidts, of course, donated much parkland around that particular facility. Schmidt Woods, of course, named after that. But the block of land itself was actually purchased from the Finneys. They donated a portion of that purchase price back to us. But and that wasn't necessarily the reason we went there because the land was free. The reason we went there was because it was the prime location of the township for both the future growth of the township, as Mr. Poff suggested, and for the location at the highways, both for our own population from around the township and for those visiting teams that are coming in. The vote was unanimous for the design of that particular facility. In fact, I stand corrected. The final vote for approval of the design of the facility, there was one dissenting vote from minor soccer. I remember, if I remember correctly, they were concerned they wanted the one field to be FIFA-sized fields, of which I don't believe there are any in Waterloo region. And since we didn't feel we would be hosting any FIFA events, we went ahead with the design the way that it was. But otherwise, of the about 40-member committee, whose names are all in the pillar in the lobby, they all approved of the current design and the way things were laid out. And the benefits for the junior C team were a better blue line club, better parking, a better dedicated club room, better revenue streams. And yes, seating only on one side instead of two, but overall there was a lot of positivity around that particular move. As far as attendance, I have a spreadsheet. Actually looking at it right now. I can't share my screen, but the last full season attendance numbers for the Provincial Junior Hockey League, the average for the entire league was in the 200s per game, as was the attendance for New Hamburg, which is in the upper half. But I don't think we're yet straining the capacity of our current arena. I know there are games when it's getting fuller, but I don't believe we're turning people away yet. Air with their Bowl Arena as a now a junior B team, as a junior C team, actually had lower attendance numbers than New Hamburg did in the last full season of play. As Ms. Jackson noted, yes, that load bearing wall, I just don't believe that's feasible to expand seating on that side, unfortunately. And I know I had a chance to talk to Mr. Poff, Mr. Joseph, representatives from skating and representatives from the Wilmot Wolverines. And the best consensus that I could see, and also reflected in the report, was that if there's going to be a fourth pad, that's maybe your opportunity to have your fourth performance pad. Maybe as more even a concert venue, a convention center, add your gyms to that. You'd be looking at a different site. But I think I'm fairly confident that from the report we've got and my own individual conversations with Brian, with Nathan, with members of the Wolverines executive, and with members of the figure skating group, that as Mr. Desai mentioned, the number one need is ice. A bit more seating is great around that ice, but the number one need is ice. And to delay the project in order to provide more seating, I just don't think is prudent for the number one set of demands for the community. So I'm quite confident that we're moving ahead in a direction that's right and prudent. And if that growth occurs, if that fourth ice pad occurs, and the junior C program continues to grow, and is straining the capacity of our current facility, then then all things are on the table, including satisfying some of the needs of those other groups who are now seeing another $15 million being spent on minor hockey that would maybe like to play badminton or basketball or volleyball or some other indoor sports in the facilities that we provide here in Wilmot.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. Councillor Hallman, you still have another question or comment?
You know me. Yes, I do. So the one thing I wanted to mention was just looking at, sorry, just trying to give you guys the exact number. Page 66 or page 4 of the report, it talks about Wi-Fi. I just wanted to mention that I know that has been a massive criteria for the user groups, and I hear about that very regularly. So would that be drastically improved with the third pad?
I guess, these are kind of getting into the weeds of
No,
things.
yes, I guess it's more of a Miss Jackson comment than for you
Okay.
to say.
Sorry, okay.
Sorry about that.
Through the mayor, we've been in discussions with IT for some time about Wi-Fi connectivity. It's not a simple solution in a concrete jungle like that, but I see Mr. Kelly has his camera on now, and I'm going to just slide this over to him if that's okay, Patrick.
Yep. Our IT services team continues to look at Wi-Fi connections at all of our facilities. Even though the answer didn't need to come from Mr. Desai, he's absolutely correct that this is getting very deep into the weeds at a early stage of the process. I would think by the time this facility is built, Wi-Fi considerations will be taken into account. We're not going to make the facility worse off. I would suspect if we need to add more receivers within it, we would do so, but quite a deep level of detail, I would say, at this point in time.
Thank you for that. I just want to make sure that I respect the questions that were brought to me by the public and that they all have them brought to the floor as requested. So the next one was, where did it go?
You want to let Ms. Middleholt slip in here?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Councillor Holman, by no means, of course, am I wanting to interrupt you necessarily, but I did want to just advise council that procedurally at this point in time, we have not had a seconder for the amendment to the motion. We haven't voted on the amendment to the motion. And then it would be at that time that we would discuss sort of the main motion at that point in time. So I'm wondering if perhaps in the interest of procedure, if we could perhaps bring it back to that, and then we can move on with the rest of the discussion, please. Thank you.
So we're asking for a seconder for the motion. Okay, so we need, Councillor Fisher wants to second that. And we'll call a vote on the amendment. All in favor? That is carried. You may continue, Councillor Holman.
There we go. Thank you, through the mayor. One question was received from members of the queer community who were happy to see the non-binary change room provided. And they were just looking to get clarification from staff that moving along in the process, that there would be direct engagement with the queer community on their needs for that room. So just a statement from staff would be helpful to make sure that the next process, that perhaps reaching out to Spectrum or other organizations in the community would be had.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I'm going to change directions on the conversation here. Just a question about the recreation facility. Was there any discussion about possibly buying a little piece of strip of land adjacent to the public works on Sandhills? And the reason I'm thinking that, I'm thinking there's a number of things on the sketches that were provided that might be of use for public works, truck wash bays, meeting rooms, things like that. And I just thought it would be interesting to examine that. And secondly, where would the skate park go in relation to the map? Is it to the right of the playground, or the east, I should say? Guess it depends which way you're looking at it.
Ms. Jackson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, we haven't really initiated any land search at this point in time for the parks operating site. That would be depending on council approval tonight. And I know that Mr. Mullenhouse is on, he's turned his camera on. He has some work underway already with respect to this that he can speak to. With respect to the skate park, the location we are hoping is adjacent to the playground in that area by the splash pad. We would have to do a fit out first, of course, and make sure there's adequate space. So nothing has begun on that process either, but we are hoping to locate it in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. So, see no further questions, comments? So where are we at now? We need the okay, so ask Madam Clerk to read the motion again, the recommendation.
That report PFRS 2022-09, Third Ice Pad and Parks Operations Center final report be received for information purposes, and that staff be directed to proceed with plans for hiring a design/bid/build team for the Third Ice Pad project located at the Wilmot Recreation Complex (WRC) as outlined in the 2022 capital budget, pending a staff report advising on the safety concerns relating to the proximity to the Nature's Alpine facility, and that staff be directed to include funds in a future budget for securing a new site and capital funds to construct a parks operations center.
So we have mover and seconder, so all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Desai, for coming, and thank you to Nathan and Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of council. Have a good night.
So the next item is the consent agenda. And there's 2 reports on that. And read the recommendation, please.
Is that report numbers PFRS-2022-08 and ILS 2022-06 be approved.
Thank you. No comments or questions. Everybody's happy. All in favor? Oh, mover and seconder are Councillor Gordick, Councillor Gerber. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. There are no additional reports. Does any member of council have a correspondence item they want to remove for discussion? Councillor Gordick.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'd like report correspondence 13.4 removed. I'm not looking for a discussion with regards to the actual correspondence for tonight, but I'm asking that it be moved so that staff be directed to provide a report for council consideration at the March 14th, 2022 council meeting that includes the Halton Hills resolution with wording specific to Wilmot Township requesting a moratorium on new gravel extraction licensing applications. Please and thank you.
Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm just wondering about getting a staff report on 13.2. There was some community interest on Wilmot exploring this with the gypsy moths. And specifically, some comments were that if staff could include a discussion on if we were to proceed with something like this, if then gypsy moth, if it would be up to the homeowner to independently report those on their property.
Okay. So we'll take that separate as well. So I'll ask clerk to read the recommendation.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So first of all, what we'll do is we'll do the correspondence items. The regular ones that'll be received for information, and then we'll deal with the other motions. So that correspondence items 13.1, 13.3, 13.5, and 13.6 be received for information.
That is moved by Councillor Holman, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so then that staff be directed to provide a staff report for council consideration at the March 14th, 2022 council meeting that includes the Halton Hills resolution with wording specific to Wilmot Township, requesting a moratorium on new gravel extraction licensing applications.
So that's moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Holman. All in favor? That is carried. Next.
Okay. And then finally, that staff be directed to provide a report relative to item 13. Correspondence item 13.2 regarding gypsy moths and homeowner responsibility. Angie? Yes. And homeowner responsibility.
Okay. And that is moved by Councillor Holman, second by Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we're at bylaws, right?
Yes, sir.
Got it. Read the recommendation for bylaws, please.
Mayor.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Could I just, could I cut in for a moment regarding?
You may. You
motion?
absolutely may.
Thank you. Just looking at the timeline for preparing for the March 14th meeting and when we have to submit reports, that's a pretty quick turnaround. I'm wondering if we can have an additional meeting or an extension on some of that reporting back. I'm wondering, looking at the staff who would be responding to those. Could we have one additional meeting to complete those?
pardon me, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Once again, in the interest of procedural law, we would need to put forward just a motion to reconsider and then amend the motion to include, to make that March 28th.
If I may interject, Mr. Mayor, would that need to be done separately by both Councillor Hallman and I, Ms. Middleholtz?
You could do it as a friendly amendment. That would be potentially the easier way to do it. Yes.
Please, a friendly amendment for me, please, and I won't speak to Councillor Hallman.
Yeah, I just, I would like to be able to confer with the staff, if that's okay, who are writing the reports, depending on, you know, how much time they think they need to research that. And I do apologize, you know, for jumping in late on that, but just looking at the timeline. Ms. Jackson, would that be you doing the gypsy moth report?
I would be flipping a coin with Mr. Okrafka, I think, or the two of us working together, but I honestly don't have a lot of knowledge about that. I would require some time to research it. So if we could have a few cycles to be able to work on this, I really don't. I've got my rec centers reopening tomorrow fully, and we've got a lot going on. So if you're okay with giving us a bit more time, Mr. Okrafka's got his hand up as well. So.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, yeah, I would agree with Ms. Jackson that there may be need for some consultation with local groups like Let's Tree Wilmot as well on the gypsy moth. It's not as, it depends on the nature of the report that you're looking for. If you're simply looking to put Wilmot's name into the resolution, and or if you want a fulsome report with some input and thoughts, it's going to definitely take more than 5 days to do that. Quite frankly, similarly with the moratorium, if the goal of the staff report is simply to have the Halton, sorry, Councillor Hallman, the Halton resolution with Wilmot filled in the blanks and supporting it, or whether it's looking for a report on what the PPS says, what the issues are, what the opportunities are, what the alternatives are, considerations. It's the level of detail that you're seeking in your motion. I wasn't sure whether you were simply looking for that resolution to be brought back with simply Wilmot's name filled in for Halton Hills, or whether you're looking for a detailed staff report, which certainly is going to take more than 5 days.
I'll let Councillor Hallman speak first, and then I will speak after.
Councillor Hallman.
Thanks for the mayor. So thank you for asking for that clarification question, because I am hoping for a bit more detail. I would appreciate reaching out to the other community groups, and there is by no means any kind of pressing time on this one, in my opinion. I think that it's important, as the community groups have addressed, that this is something they care about. So I think that community engagement would be appreciated, and that with that, the concerns of some of these engaging groups is that what would that then, with a motion like this, do to the average homeowner with responsibility for reporting? So I think that that more time and more investment and more community engagement is beneficial on this one.
Ms. Jackson, you want to add?
Thank you. If I can just add to that, we do have a capital project for a tree canopy policy to be developed this year. If you are okay with not putting a timeline on it, then we can roll it into that process, and that could be included within the tree canopy policy, as well as any other sort of similar type of challenge that will impact the tree canopy. Emerald ash borers will obviously be a part of that as well. So if that's okay, we'll make sure that gets rolled in instead of having a specific timeline on it.
For the mayor, I think that makes perfect sense.
Thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. So I believe 4 other municipalities, including North Dumfries, Mayor Foxton, has passed the moratorium. So I'm looking to have a discussion about passing a moratorium so that we stop the gravel pit extractions within Wilmot Township. So, and I believe 3 other communities, Push Lynch and I can't think of the other name off the top of my head. I have it in an email that I sent to Ms. Chambers to sort of add to that for staff to perhaps have some background information to contact those other municipalities that have put forward this moratorium going forward. So I'm looking to seek staff input on that, and then council to hopefully pass something that we stop gravel extraction. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, just a bit of follow-up, Mr. Mayor, that I would like at least within the next 2 cycles. I'm thinking that this needs to be something that we discuss sooner rather than later.
Very good. Thank you. That's so noted. No further comments. So we're looking at bylaws. Read the recommendation for bylaws, please, sir, ma'am.
That bylaw 2021-55 be read a third time and finally passed in open council.
That is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fisher, all in favor. That is carried. Notice of motions, announcements. From what I understand, the clinics on the weekend at the WRC seem to be busy. We haven't had any numbers yet, but there seem to be some pretty good traffic going there. So that's a good thing. And nothing else. Confirmatory bylaw recommendation, please.
That bylaw number 2022-10 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in open council.
That is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fisher, all in favor. That is carried. And now the recommendation you've all been waiting for.
That we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor.
Moved by Councillor Fisher, second by Councillor Hallman, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Have yourselves a great night. Great meeting. Thank you.